The ice moon had no name, only a number in the star charts that nobody bothered to remember. And Dr. Yara-chan liked it that way, because unnamed places often held secrets that named places had long forgotten. She stood at the edge of the excavation pit, her breath fogging inside her helmet as she looked down at the shape buried beneath 12 meters of ancient ice. And even from this distance, she could tell that whatever lay below was not natural. "Are you seeing this?" asked her assistant Marcus through the comlink, his voice tight with excitement and something that might have been fear. Yara nodded even though he could not see her from his position at the scanning station. And she took a careful step down the carved ice stairs that her team had spent 3 days cutting into the frozen surface. The ship emerged from the ice like a creature waking from a long sleep. And its hull was dark and sleek and covered in patterns that seemed to flow like water frozen in mid-motion. And Yara had studied alien vessels for 20 years, but she had never seen anything like this. Her scanner hummed as she swept it across the exposed section of the hull. And the readings made no sense at all, because the dating algorithm kept returning errors. Kept insisting that the metal was impossibly old, 12,000 years. Marcus said over the comm, and his voice cracked on the number. "That cannot be right, because nothing in the galactic records goes back that far, except the elder races. And this does not match any of their designs." Yara pressed her gloved hand against the hull and felt nothing through the thick material. But somehow she imagined she could sense a faint warmth, a memory of life that had once filled this vessel. The excavation took another week. And during that time, Yara barely slept because every hour brought new discoveries and new questions that kept her mind spinning like a star going supernova. The ship was a fighter craft, small and fast and built for a single pilot. And its wings swept back like the feathers of a hunting bird. And its weapon systems, though long dead, showed signs of incredible sophistication. But it was the damage that told the real story. Scoring marks covered the hull in dozens of places. The kind of marks that came from energy weapons fired at close range. And one whole section of the ship had been torn open by something that must have been catastrophic. A wound that would have killed anyone inside within seconds. She went down fighting. Yara whispered to herself as she climbed through the breach and into the dock. Interior of the ancient vessel. The cockpit was small and intimate, designed for someone roughly human-sized. And the pilot's seat was empty, but the restraints hung loose as if someone had unbuckled long ago. And Yara wondered where the body had gone and what had happened in the final moments of this ship's life. The controls were arranged in a pattern that felt strangely intuitive, almost familiar, as if Yara had seen something like them before in a dream she could not quite remember. And she ran her fingers over the dead console and tried to imagine the hands that had once gripped these controls. Then she saw it beneath a layer of dust that had somehow accumulated over 12,000 years. There was a small plate on the console, and on that plate was a serial number etched in careful, precise characters. Yara wiped away the dust with trembling fingers and stared at the markings. And her heart stopped beating for one long, terrible moment because she recognized the script. It was not alien, it was human, but that was impossible, because humanity had only achieved spaceflight 300 years ago. And before that, humans had been bound to Earth with no knowledge of the galaxy beyond their own solar system. "Marcus," she said, and her voice came out as barely a whisper. "I need you to come down here right now." He arrived within minutes, sliding down the ice stairs with more speed than safety. And when he saw her face through her helmet visor, he stopped and stared because he had never seen her look so shaken. "What is it?" he asked. Yara pointed at the serial number without speaking. And Marcus leaned in close and read the characters. And she watched his face change as understanding dawned. "That is impossible," he said. "That script is based on old Earth Latin alphabet, but this ship is 12,000 years old. And humans were still living in caves 12,000 years ago. Yara shook her head slowly. And a terrible, wonderful idea was forming in her mind. An idea that went against everything she had ever been taught about human history and galactic civilization. What if we were not? She asked, what if everything we know about human history is wrong? Marcus stared at her for a long moment, and then he looked back at the serial number. And Yara could see him trying to find another explanation. Any explanation that made more sense than what she was suggesting. But there was no other explanation. The serial number was human. The ship was 12,000 years old. And somewhere in the vast gap between those two facts lay a truth that had been hidden for longer than any human civilization had existed. We need to contact the Galactic Archivum, Yara said. And her voice was steady now because she had made her decision. They keep records going back to the beginning of the Concorde. And if there's any information about this ship, they will have it. Marcus nodded, but his eyes were worried. And Yara understood why, because the Archivum was controlled by the elder races, the ancient species who had ruled the galaxy for millennia before humans ever looked up at the stars. If this discovery was real, if humans had once traveled among the stars 12,000 years ago, then the elder races would have known about it. And if they had known, then they had kept it secret. Yara looked around the small cockpit one last time, and she tried to imagine the pilot who had sat in the seat, who had fought and died in a war that history had forgotten. And she made a silent promise to that unknown warrior. She would find the truth, no matter what it cost her, no matter what secrets she had to uncover. She would find out who had flown this ship and what had happened to them. The universe owed that pilot a name, and Yara-chan was going to give it to them. The response from the Galactic Archivum took 3 days to arrive. And when it came, it did not come alone. Yara stood on the observation deck of her small research station and watched as 7 Concorde warships dropped out of hyperspace one after another, their massive hulls blocking out the stars like metal clouds. And her stomach twisted with a fear she could not name. They sent a battle fleet, Marcus said from beside her, and his voice was hollow with shock. We asked for historical records, and they sent a battle fleet. The lead ship was a Vethkai dreadnought, one of the ancient vessels that the elder races used only for matters of extreme importance. And its design was elegant and terrifying. All sweeping curves and weapons arrays that could glass a planet in minutes. A shuttle detached from the dreadnought and began its descent toward the station. And Yara felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. A weight that grew heavier with every passing second. The shuttle docked with a soft clang that echoed through the station corridors. And Yara walked to meet their visitors with Marcus close behind her. And her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. The airlock opened with a hiss, and a figure stepped through that made Yara catch her breath. The Vethkai were one of the oldest races in the galaxy. Beings of light and crystal who had been traveling between stars when Earth was still cooling from its formation. And this one was ancient, even by their standards. His form shimmered with colors that had no names in human language. And his face, if it could be called a face, was a mask of swirling patterns that seemed to shift with every thought that passed through his mind. Dr. Chun, he said, and his voice was like music and thunder combined. I am Saranthas of the Archivum, and I have come because of your message. Yara straightened her spine and met his gaze, or at least the place where his gaze might have been, and she refused to show the fear that was clawing at her insides. I asked for information about a serial number, she said. I did not expect the Concorde to send warships. Saranthas made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sigh, and the colors in his form darkened for a moment before brightening again. The serial number you sent belongs to a ship class that was supposed to have been destroyed 12,000 years ago, he said. Its very existence is a matter of galactic security, and I am here to determine what you have found and what you intend to do with it. Yara felt Marcus shift nervously beside her. But she kept her attention on the ancient being in front of her. "What I intend to do is learn the truth," she said. "That ship is human in design, but it predates human spaceflight by thousands of years. And I want to know how that is possible." Sorrentes was silent for a long moment, and the patterns on his face shifted and swirled in ways that Yara could not interpret. And she wondered what thoughts were moving through a mind that had existed for longer than human civilization. "Walk with me," he said finally. "There are things I must show you, and things I must tell you, and none of them are easy." They walked through the station corridors to the research lab where Yara had been studying the artifacts recovered from the ancient ship. And Sorrentes moved with a grace that seemed impossible for a being of his size and age. 12,000 years ago, he began. The galaxy faced an enemy that nearly destroyed everything. A species we called the Hollow, because they consumed all life and left only emptiness behind. Yara listened as he described the Scourge War, a conflict so vast and terrible that it had nearly ended all sentient life in the galaxy. And the elder races had fought with everything they had, but it was not enough. "We were losing," Sorrentes said, and his voice was heavy with the memory of ancient grief. "World after world fell to the Hollow, and we believed that the end had come, that the galaxy would become a tomb for all thinking beings." He paused at the window that looked out over the ice moon and the excavation site below, and the colors in his form grew dim and sad. "Then they came," he said, "from a region of space we had never explored, a species we had never encountered. Beings who called themselves Terrans." Yara felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold outside. "Terrans," she repeated. "You mean humans?" Sorrentes turned to face her, and for the first time she could see something like emotion in his alien features. "I mean your ancestors," he said. "The humans who came before, who saved the galaxy from the Hollow, and whose existence has been erased from every record in known space." Marcus made a sound of disbelief, but Yara held up her hand to silence him because she needed to hear this, needed to understand what had happened to her people so long ago. "Why would you erase them?" she asked. "If they saved the galaxy, why would you hide what they did?" Sorrentes was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was soft with something that might have been shame. "Because we were afraid," he said. "The Terrans saved us, but they also terrified us. And in our fear, we made a decision that has haunted my people ever since." He reached into his robes and withdrew a small crystal that glowed with inner light. And when he held it up, images began to form in the air around them, images of war, images of humans fighting and dying and refusing to surrender, images of a species that stared death in the face and laughed. "Let me show you," Sorrentes said. "Let me show you what your ancestors were, and what they did, and why the galaxy has never been the same since." Yara stepped closer to the floating images, and she watched as history came alive before her eyes. A history that had been stolen from her people. A history that changed everything she thought she knew about humanity. And somewhere in those images, she knew, was the pilot of the ship she had found, the warrior who had died alone in the ice, the ghost whose name had been erased from the stars. She was going to find that name. She was going to bring that ghost home. The images floating in the air showed a galaxy burning, and Yara watched with tears in her eyes as world after world fell to the Hollow, their populations consumed by creatures that existed only to feed and spread and destroy. The Hollow were nightmares given form, beings of shadow and hunger that moved through space like a plague. And wherever they touched, they left nothing but silence and death. "We threw everything we had at them," Sorrentes said, his voice heavy with ancient memory. "Fleets of thousands of ships, weapons that could shatter moons, armies of millions. And none of it was enough." The images shifted to show the elder races in retreat, their beautiful ships fleeing from swarms of hollow vessels, their proud civilizations crumbling under the relentless assault. "We had accepted our fate," Sorrentes continued. We believed the galaxy would end, that everything we had built over millions of years would be devoured and forgotten. Then the images changed again, and Yara saw ships she recognized, ships like the one she had found in the ice, ships that were small and fast and deadly, ships that moved through space like predators hunting prey, ships that bore the markings of a species the galaxy had never seen. The Terrans arrived without warning, Sorrento said. They came from a region of space beyond our maps, a place we had never explored because we believed it was empty. Yara watched as the Terran fleet engaged the Hollow for the first time, and what she saw made her heart swell with pride and terror in equal measure. The elder races fought defensively, carefully, always seeking to minimize losses and preserve their forces. But the Terrans fought like beings who had never learned the meaning of retreat. They attacked where the Hollow were strongest, struck at targets that seemed suicidal to approach. And they did it all with a ferocity that the galaxy had never witnessed. Your ancestors were already warriors when they found us, Sorrento said. They had fought wars among themselves for thousands of years, and they had learned things about combat that we could not understand. The images showed Terran pilots flying into the heart of hollow swarm clouds, detonating their own reactors to take as many enemies with them as possible. And Yara felt sick and proud all at once. They called it sacrifice, Sorrento said. They believed that dying for others was the highest honor a being could achieve. And they proved that belief again and again. One image stood out from the rest. A recording that showed a single Terran fighter breaking away from its squadron and diving toward a massive hollow vessel, a hive mother that commanded millions of the shadow creatures. This is the pilot of your ship, Sorrento said, and his voice grew soft with what might have been reverence. His name was Commander Elias Vance, and his call sign was Reaper. Yara leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the small fighter as it wove through a storm of enemy fire, dodging and spinning and never slowing down. The hive mother had to be destroyed, Sorrento explained. Without it, the hollow forces in that sector would lose coordination. But its defenses were too strong for any conventional attack. Commander Vance did not attempt a conventional attack. His fighter carried a prototype weapon, a device that could create a miniature singularity, a tiny black hole that would collapse anything near it into nothingness. He flew directly into the hive mother, Sorrento said, through its outer defenses, through its internal chambers, all the way to its central core. And then he activated the weapon. The image showed a flash of light so bright it overwhelmed the recording sensors. And when the light faded, the hive mother was gone, along with everything within 1,000 kilometers of where it had been. The explosion should have killed him, Sorrento said. By all laws of physics, nothing should have survived that detonation. But something had survived. The images showed the wreckage of Commander Vance's fighter tumbling through space, its hull torn open, its systems dead, thrown by the force of the explosion into a trajectory that would carry it across the galaxy. We searched for him, Sorrento said. The Terrans searched for him, everyone searched. But he was never found. Until now, Yara thought. Until a human woman 12,000 years later dug him out of the ice on a moon that nobody cared about. He was a hero, she said, and her voice cracked on the word. He saved everyone, Sorrento nodded. And the colors in his form shifted to something that looked like sorrow. They were all heroes, he said. The Terrans fought for 3 years. And in those 3 years they turned the tide of the war. They pushed the hollow back. They gave the galaxy hope when hope had died. The images show battle after battle, victory after victory. And in every recording, Yara saw humans fighting and dying and never giving up. The war ended when the last hive mother was destroyed, Sorrento said. The hollow scattered and fled, and the galaxy was saved. Yara waited for the joy that should have followed those words. But Sorrento did not look joyful, and the colors in his form grew dark and troubled. What happened next? she asked, and she was afraid of the answer. Saranthas was silent for a long moment. And when he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "We made a mistake," he said. "A terrible mistake that my people have regretted ever since." He turned to face her, and Yara saw something in his alien features that she had not expected to see: shame. "We were afraid of them," he said. "The Terrans had saved us, but they had also shown us what they were capable of. And we were terrified of what they might do next." Yara felt cold dread settling into her stomach. And she knew that whatever came next would change everything. "What did you do?" she asked. Saranthas bowed his head. And when he answered, his voice was heavy with 12,000 years of guilt. "We erased them," he said. "We erased your ancestors from history, and we made sure they could never threaten us again." The silence that followed Saranthas' confession was heavier than the ice that had buried Commander Vance's ship for 12,000 years. Yara stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what she had just heard. And beside her, Marcus had gone pale with shock and growing anger. "Explain," Yara said, and her voice was flat and cold. "Tell me exactly what you did to my people." Saranthas moved to the window and stared out at the stars. And the colors in his form were dim and gray like a dying sunset. After the war ended, the Council of Elders convened to discuss the future, he said. The Terrans had requested nothing in return for their sacrifice. No territory, no tribute, no recognition. They simply wanted to return home and rebuild. He paused, and Yara could see the weight of ancient memory pressing down on him. But we could not let them go, he continued. We had seen what they could do, how they fought, how they refused to accept defeat, even when defeat was certain. And we were afraid. Marcus stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. You were afraid of the people who saved your lives? He demanded. They bled for you, they died for you, and you repaid them with fear? Saranthas did not turn around. You must understand, he said. The elder races had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. We had built civilizations that spanned thousands of worlds. And we had done it by being careful, by being patient, by never taking risks that could not be calculated. His form flickered with colors that might have been shame or might have been regret. The Terrans were everything we were not, he said. They were chaotic and unpredictable, and they did not think the way we thought. They did not value the things we valued, and we could not understand them. He finally turned to face Yara, and she saw something in his features that looked almost like pleading. We told ourselves it was for the greater good, he said. We told ourselves that the Terrans were too dangerous to be allowed among the stars, that eventually they would turn their fury against us, that it was only a matter of time before the saviors became the conquerors. Yara felt sick. What did you do? She asked again, and this time her voice was barely a whisper. Saranthas gestured, and new images appeared in the air between them, images that showed the Terran homeworld, a blue and green planet that Yara recognized immediately. Earth. We could not destroy them, Saranthas said. Even in our fear, we could not bring ourselves to commit genocide against the species that had saved us. So instead, we chose isolation. The images showed massive automated defense platforms being constructed around Earth's solar system, thousands of them, each one armed with weapons powerful enough to destroy any ship that tried to leave. We told the Terrans that we were creating a protective barrier to keep them safe from any remaining hollow forces, Saranthas said. And they believed us because they trusted us, because they had fought beside us, because they could not imagine that we would betray them. Marcus made a sound of disgust, but Yara kept her eyes fixed on the images. Once the barrier was complete, we activated it, Saranthas continued. Any ship that tried to leave Earth's system was destroyed, and any signal that tried to reach the outside galaxy was blocked. The images shifted to show Terran ships exploding as they attempted to breach the barrier, and Yara felt tears burning in her eyes. They tried to escape for generations, Saranthas said. They sent ship after ship against the barrier, and each one was destroyed. Until eventually, they stopped trying. He waved his hand and the images changed again, showing the passage of time on Earth as centuries became millennia. They forgot, he said. Without access to their records, without contact with the outside galaxy. Each generation remembered less than the one before, until the Terrans who had once traveled among the stars became humans who believed they had never left their planet. Yara understood now the lost years of human history, the gaps in the archaeological record, the strange inconsistencies that scholars had puzzled over for centuries. It all made sense. Humanity had not evolved on Earth in isolation. Humanity had been imprisoned on Earth as punishment for saving the galaxy. The barrier was designed to deactivate after 10,000 years. Sorantha said, "We believed that by then the Terrans would have forgotten everything, and they could be reintegrated into galactic society as a new species, one that did not remember what they had been." Marcus laughed bitterly. "And when we finally developed spaceflight again 300 years ago," he said, "you pretended to welcome us as newcomers, as primitives who were just taking their first steps among the stars." Soranthes bowed his head. "Yes," he said. "We debated whether to tell you the truth, but in the end we decided that ignorance was safer, that you were better off not knowing what had been done to you." Yara stepped forward until she was standing directly in front of the ancient being. And when she spoke, her voice was steady and cold. "You stole 12,000 years from us," she said. "You took our history, our heritage, our heroes, and you buried them all in silence and lies." Soranthes met her gaze, and she saw the weight of guilt in his features. "Yes," he said again, "and I have carried that guilt for longer than your species can imagine." Yara turned away and walked to the window where she could see the excavation site below, the place where Commander Vance had lain forgotten for millennia. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked. "Why not maintain the lie?" Soranthes was quiet for a long moment before he answered. "Because you found the ship," he said. "Because the truth was going to come out eventually. And because I have spent 12,000 years waiting for a chance to confess what we did." He moved to stand beside her at the window. "I was there," he said. "I fought alongside Commander Vance in the war. I saw him fly into the Hive Mother. And I voted against the isolation when the council debated what to do." His form brightened slightly. "I lost that vote," he said. "But I never stopped believing that someday someone would find the truth. And when they did, I wanted to be the one to tell them everything." Yara stared out at the ice and the stars and the ship that had changed everything. "What do you expect me to do with this?" Soranthes did not answer, and Yara realized that the choice was hers alone. The offer came 3 days later, delivered by a delegation of Concord representatives who arrived on a shuttle that gleamed with wealth and power. They offered Yara everything: a seat on the Galactic Science Council, unlimited funding for her research, a private estate on any world of her choosing, wealth beyond anything she had ever imagined. And all she had to do was forget what she had learned. "Think of the chaos," the lead delegate said. A tall being from one of the younger elder races, whose name Yara did not bother to remember. "If this information becomes public, it will tear the Concord apart. It will destroy alliances that have lasted for millennia. It will plunge the galaxy into conflict." Yara listened in silence, as they listed all the terrible things that would happen if the truth came out. And she thought about Commander Vance lying alone in the ice, forgotten and erased. "The humans who died in the war are gone," the delegate continued. "Nothing you do can bring them back. Nothing you do can undo what happened. So why cause pain and suffering for the living?" Marcus stood beside her, and she could feel his tension, his anger, his desperate hope that she would make the right choice. But what was the right choice? The delegate was not wrong about the consequences, and Yara knew that revealing the truth would cause upheaval across the galaxy. That old wounds would be reopened and old grudges would be remembered. She thought about her parents, who had raised her to believe that humanity was a young species taking its first steps among ancient civilizations. She thought about all the humans who had grown up believing they were newcomers, primitives, latecomers to a party that had started without them. She thought about the pilots who had flown into certain death to save species that would later betray them. And she thought about Elias Vance, who had given everything and been rewarded with oblivion. "No," she said. The delegate blinked in surprise. "Dr. Chun, I do not think you understand the magnitude of what we are offering," he said. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Yara stood up and walked to the console where she had been preparing her message for the past 3 days. A message that contained everything Saranthus had told her. Every image, every record, every piece of evidence that proved what had been done to humanity. "I understand perfectly," she said. "You are offering me a bribe to help you continue lying to my entire species." She turned to face the delegation, and her eyes were hard and bright. "You want me to pretend that 12,000 years of imprisonment never happened? That the warriors who saved your ancestors deserve to stay forgotten? That the crime your people committed should remain hidden forever?" The delegate shifted uncomfortably. "It is not that simple," he said. "Yes, it is," Yara replied. "It is exactly that simple." She pressed the button on the console, and the message began transmitting on every frequency, to every station, to every corner of the galaxy. "What have you done?" the delegate demanded. "I have told the truth," Yara said. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming within hours. The message had spread across the galaxy, translated into 1,000 languages, and shared on every network that existed. And the response was everything the Concord had feared: the elder races fractured, with some demanding that the truth be suppressed, and others calling for justice and reparations. And ancient alliances crumbled as species that had trusted each other for millennia discovered that trust had been built on lies. But it was the human response that mattered most to Yara. At first there was shock, a numbness that spread through human space as billions of people learned that everything they knew about their history was wrong. Then came the anger, a fury that burned hotter than any star, a rage at the betrayal that had stolen their heritage and imprisoned their ancestors. But beneath the anger, there was something else. Pride. Humans had not stumbled into the stars as primitives begging for scraps from older civilizations. Humans had once been warriors who had saved the galaxy, heroes who had faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. Legends who had been erased but never truly destroyed. Yara watched as memorials were erected on 100 worlds, as the names of Terran pilots were spoken aloud for the first time in 12,000 years, as humanity reclaimed its lost identity. And on the ice moon where she had made her discovery, a monument was built around the ship of Commander Elias Vance, his fighter restored and preserved for all eternity. A testament to the sacrifice of a hero who had died alone but would never be forgotten again. The dedication ceremony drew beings from across the galaxy, including many from the elder races who had come to pay their respects and ask for forgiveness. Saranthus stood at the front of the crowd, his ancient form shimmering with colors that might have been grief or might have been hope. Pilots from 100 species flew in formation overhead, their ships trailing lights of every color, a tribute to the Terran warriors who had saved their ancestors. Yara stepped up to the podium that had been placed before the monument, and she looked out at the sea of faces, human and alien alike, all of them waiting to hear what she would say. She thought about all the things she could tell them, all the anger and pain and betrayal that deserved to be expressed, all the justice that was owed. But when she opened her mouth, only simple words came out. They came from nowhere, she said, reading from the plaque that had been affixed to the monument. "They saved everyone, they asked for nothing. We forgot them anyway. She paused and looked up at the stars that had witnessed 12,000 years of silence. Never again. She finished. The crowd was quiet for a long moment. And then a single voice began to cheer, and then another, and another, until the sound of celebration filled the air and echoed across the ice moon. Humanity had found its lost legacy, and the galaxy would never forget them. Again, Yara turned away from the crowd and walked to the ship that had started everything. And she placed her hand on the cold metal hull one last time. "Welcome home, Commander," she whispered. "Welcome home." And somewhere in the void between the stars, she imagined she could hear the Reaper finally resting in peace.